Picture a stadium packed with people. Now imagine that all these people suddenly lost their heads, and those heads were stacked into perfect geometric shapes in the middle of the desert. This is not a horror movie script. This is the real architecture of one of the most terrifying men in history. In this video, we will uncover the mystery of a lame old man who, despite being disabled, held half the world in fear, from Moscow to Delhi. You will learn why the opening of his tomb by Soviet scientists eerily coincided with the first day of the Great Patriotic War, and what terrible curse the elders in Samarkand warned about. We will tell you the scandalous details of the humiliation of a great Ottoman sultan, whom this conqueror, according to legend, carted around in a cage like an animal, forcing his wife to serve at feasts buck naked. How did he turn genocide into a planned economy, where every soldier was required to meet a quota of severed heads? And why was his own grandson, a great scientist, beheaded on the orders of his own son? Watch until the end to understand how a man who built paradisiacal gardens created hell on earth, and why his empire vanished instantly, like a puddle of blood under the scorching sun. Imagine the smell. Not the smell of burning that has already soaked into the walls and clothes, but a sickly sweet, nauseating stench hanging over the ruins of the greatest city of Islam. July 1401, Baghdad. The heat here is such that it seems the air itself is melting, but the silence hanging over the city is even heavier. You do not hear screams. There is no one left to scream. You hear only the steady drone of millions of flies and a dry clacking sound. That is bone knocking against bone. Timur's masons are working without rest, but instead of bricks, they have human heads in their hands. Look at this with your own eyes. Do not turn away. 120 towers. 120 perfectly stacked pyramids rising above the smoking ruins. This is not a chaotic pile of bodies. This is architecture. In each pyramid, skulls are cemented in clay, turned with empty eye sockets facing outward so they stare at anyone who dares to question the conqueror's power. 90,000 heads. 90,000 fathers, sons, merchants, and poets whose lives were cut short by a single wave of a hand. To understand this scale, picture a packed modern stadium where every spectator is suddenly decapitated, and all those heads are stacked into neat geometric figures in the middle of the desert. This is not just cruelty. This is a message. It is the bloodiest billboard in history, on which only one word is written: submission. Now shift your gaze away from the towers of death to the tent standing on the hill, which offers the best view of this man-made hell. There sits a man whose name makes half the world tremble. He is 65 years old. For the Middle Ages, he is a deeply old man, but there is not a hint of frailty in his posture. He sits upright, as if carved from granite. Look at his face. It is not distorted by rage or madness. It is calm. He thoughtfully moves a piece on a board for shatranj, ancient chess. His name is Timur. Europe will remember him as Tamerlane, and he wears this nickname, Timur-i Leng, Timur the Lame, like a medal, though enemies whisper it like a curse. Look closely at his body. This body is a map of battles survived, a living atlas of pain. His right leg is crippled. The kneecap has fused solid, turning the leg into a stiff prop. His right arm, which once held a sword, is now withered and crooked. The shoulder and elbow are so damaged that he can barely lift a goblet. He is a cripple. By all the laws of nature and the steppe, he should have died 40 years ago in some ditch, forgotten and trampled. But this cripple holds a continent by the throat. What is his secret? Why do hundreds of thousands follow this lame old man, ready to die at his first word? Forget the image of a wild barbarian smashing civilization with a club. That is a lie convenient for the defeated. Timur is an intellectual. While his soldiers wash the blood from their blades in the waters of the Tigris, he holds theological debates with surviving imams, recites the Quran by heart, and discusses the nuances of Persian poetry. He speaks Turkic, Persian, and Mongolian. He knows history better than those who write it. He plays chess not only on a board, but on the map of Eurasia, moving armies as easily as pawns. It is this contrast that creates true horror. If he were a madman, he could be understood, but he is absolutely, frighteningly sane. The pyramids of skulls in Baghdad are not an outburst of anger. They are a cold, mathematical calculation. The economics of terror. He knows. If you slaughter one city so that the legends of it freeze the blood, the next 10 cities will open their gates themselves. Fear is a resource, and Timur mines it more effectively than anyone before him. He does not build a state in the traditional sense. He does not write laws like Genghis Khan. He creates a cult of power where he is the only deity. I am the scourge of God, they say he called himself. But that is hypocrisy. The scourge of God does not build mausoleums of such beauty that they eclipse the sky. Timur is a paradox. With one hand, he turns blooming oases into a desert where only jackals howl, and with the other, he gathers the best masters of the world in Samarkand to create paradise on earth. He loves art. He loves beauty. It is just that the price of this beauty does not matter to him, even if that price is 90,000 heads in Baghdad. Historians will argue for centuries. Is he a genius or a butcher? The savior of Europe from the Ottoman yoke, or a demon who set back the development of the East by centuries. But standing here, under the scorching sun of Iraq, inhaling the smell of decomposition, it is hard to think about greatness. You see only a mechanism of destruction, launched by the will of one man. A man who killed not because he had to, but because he could. His empire rests not on bureaucracy, but on constant movement. Stopping, for him, is like death. As long as the horses gallop, as long as the blood flows, as long as the mountains of skulls grow, he is alive. He feeds on this energy of decay. But where did this infinite, unquenchable thirst for power come from? How did the son of a petty bey, who had no right to the throne, become a ruler whose shadow covered the world from Delhi to Moscow? To understand the architect of the pyramids of death, we need to go back, to a place where there was no gold, no armies, no greatness, to the dirty steppes of Transoxiana, where a young, unknown bandit spilled blood for the first time, not yet knowing that one day, half the world would drown in it. To the valley near the city of Kesh, the green city of Kesh, the middle of the 14th century. Forget about the marble and gold you saw in Baghdad. Here, in the foothills, it smells of manure, sweat, and cheap wine. This is a world where a human life is worth less than a good steed, and it is here that the path begins for the man who will one day bring this world to its knees. But for now, he is nobody, just the son of a local chieftain from the Barlas tribe. His name is Timur, and he is a bandit. Not a noble avenger, not a hero of ballads, but a calculating, daring cattle rustler. Picture this scene: a group of riders driving someone else's sheep across the dusty steppe. At the lead is a young guy, tall, broad-shouldered, with burning eyes. He is laughing. For him, this is a game, the thrill. He is charismatic as the devil. People are drawn to him not because he is noble, but because there is always loot with him. He is generous. He divides the spoils equally, keeping only the glory for himself. Even then, he understood the main principle of power. Loyalty is bought, not with fear, but with gold and success. But luck is a fickle lady, especially in the steppes of Sistan. One botched raid changes everything. It was not a great battle of two empires. It was a dirty skirmish with shepherds defending their flocks. The whistle of arrows, a strike, another strike. One arrow pierces his right thigh, another digs into his shoulder. Timur falls into the dust, writhing in pain. At this moment, history should have ended. A wounded wolf does not live long in the steppe. He is finished off by his own or eaten by others. But he survived. He lay in a fever for weeks, balancing on the edge of madness and death. And when he stood up, he was different. Gone was the agile youth who could leap into the saddle at a full gallop. A lame cripple emerged. His right leg did not bend. His right arm hung like a whip. Locals gave him a nickname that was meant to be a brand of shame. Timur Ileng. Timur the Lame. In Europe, this would be distorted to Tamerlane. Do you hear how that name sounds? It has the grinding of metal. For any other steppe dweller, such an injury is a death sentence. You cannot draw a heavy bow? You are useless. You cannot control a horse with just your legs? You are a dead man. However, Timur achieves the impossible. He turns his weakness into fuel. If he cannot be the strongest physically, he will become the most cunning, the cruelest, the smartest. Pain became his constant companion, the very thing that does not let him relax for a second. He learns to fight with his left hand. He develops tactics where his personal participation in the slaughter is not as important as the ability to move regiments. He transfers from the horse of war to the horse of politics. And here the second key player enters the stage. Hussein. Emir Hussein, his sworn brother, his best friend, and his worst enemy. It is a classic tragedy, worthy of Shakespeare's pen, played out in the scenery of Central Asia. They were like two young lions deciding to divide a pride. Hussein is noble, rich. He has everything Timur does not. Timur is daring, popular with the troops, and hungry for power. They form an alliance. Together they overthrow the Mongol governors. Together they capture Samarkand. Together they divide the throne. Timur even marries Hussein's sister, sealing the alliance with blood. But in the steppe, there can be only one leader. The friendship of two predators always ends in a fight. Hussein makes a fatal mistake. He starts to believe that Timur is his subordinate. He taxes the people, builds palaces, enjoys power. Timur does something different. He distributes his riches to the poor, dervishes, and simple warriors. He creates the image of a just emir. He whispers in everyone's ear, Hussein is greedy. Hussein has forgotten the laws of the ancestors. Hussein is a tyrant. He weaves intrigue so subtly that when open war begins, Hussein's army melts away like snow in spring. The soldiers simply switch to the lame one's side. 1470, Balkh. Hussein is besieged in the citadel. He realizes he has lost and begs for mercy. He comes out to Timur, reminding him of their old friendship, of oaths of loyalty. And Timur, looking into the eyes of his sworn brother, promises, I will not spill your blood. And he kept his word. Formally. Timur was a master at finding loopholes in oaths. He really did not spill Hussein's blood. He simply nodded to his henchmen, and they strangled Hussein with a bowstring. Or, according to other accounts, they allowed him to die under the hooves of horses, wrapped in a carpet. Blood did not touch the ground, therefore the oath was not broken. Remember this moment. This is Timur's signature style. Cynical adherence to the letter of the law while completely trampling its spirit. That day he understood, morality is a fairy tale for the weak. For the strong, there is only expediency. Now he is the sole ruler of Transoxiana. Samarkand is at his feet. But there is one problem. A problem that could stop anyone, but not him. Timur is not a Genghisid. The blood of Genghis Khan does not flow in his veins. According to the Yasa, the great law of the steppes, only a direct descendant of the Shaker of the universe can be Khan. Timur is just an emir, a warlord. Any attempt to sit on the throne would make him a usurper in the eyes of the entire Mongol world. Legitimacy in those times is everything. Without the right blood, you are nobody. What does Timur do? He invents a brilliant political spectacle. He finds a shabby, destitute descendant of Genghis Khan named Soyurgatmish, washes him, dresses him in silks, and sits him on the throne. "Here is your Khan," Timur tells the people. Soyurgatmish sits on the throne, receives ambassadors, signs decrees. But everyone knows, if the Khan wants to sneeze, he first asks permission from Emir Timur, who sits modestly on the step below. It was a brilliant screen. Timur takes the title Gurgan, son-in-law of the Khan, having married Hussein's widow, who was a Genghisid. He rules in the name of a puppet, possessing absolute power, but not violating ancient laws. He created a system where the throne is a prop, and the sword is the only reality. Samarkand begins to bloom. Riches begin to flow here, into the heart of his domains. But one city is not enough for Timur. One region is not enough for him. His ambitions grow along with his army. His gaze turns beyond the horizon, to where the sky merges with the endless steppe, to where the powerful Golden Horde rules. At this time, in the cold steppes of the Deshti Kipchak, a drama of its own is playing out. A young, ambitious, and cornered prince is fleeing from pursuers. He has lost everything: his father, his army, hope. He has nowhere to go but south, to the great emir, whose fame for generosity and treachery is already thundering across Asia. The name of this fugitive is Tohtamish. He comes to Timur barefoot and hungry, begging for help. And Timur, looking at this youth, sees in him the perfect tool. He sees the key to the north. He sees an opportunity to subjugate the Great Silk Road. Timur accepts Tohtamish like a son, gifts him weapons, horses, gold. He calls him his protege. He promises to put him on the throne of the Golden Horde. "I will make you the great Khan," says Timur, and his voice sounds like fatherly care. But in the eyes of the Iron Tiger, there is no love. There is only the cold calculation of a chess player who has just found the perfect pawn for a game where the stake will be half the world. He does not yet know that this pawn will one day turn into a dragon and try to devour its creator. While in Samarkand they feast in honor of new alliances, clouds gather in the north. The wind changes. It carries the smell of snow and blood. The great steppe has frozen in anticipation of a war that will make even the heavens shudder. The hunt begins. Never turn your back on a wolf you fed from your hand. Timur made one mistake. He judged people by himself. He thought that Tohtamish, having received the throne of the Golden Horde from his hands, would be an eternal debtor, an obedient vassal, a watchdog in the north. But Toktamish learned the lessons of the Iron Cripple too well. The first rule of power: destroy the one who created you, so that no one can say you were just someone's shadow. As soon as Timur was distracted by the conquest of Persia, his favorite son struck him in the back. Toktamish swept through Azerbaijan with fire, plundered Tabriz, and dared to besiege Bukhara, the heart of Timur's domains. This was not just betrayal. It was a personal insult, a spit in the face of a father. Timur's rage was cold, like the glaciers of the Hindu Kush. He did not scream. He simply turned his huge army 180 degrees and gave an order that made seasoned veterans hold their breath. We are going north. We enter the year 1395. Forget about the hot sands and eastern bazaars. Timur leads his Tumans into the lands of darkness. That is what Arabs and Persians called the endless steppes of the Deshti Kipchak, present-day Russia and Kazakhstan. This is not a war against an army. This is a war against geography. Imagine a march thousands of miles long, through territory where there are no cities, no food, no roads. Only tall grass, the howling of wolves, and wind that chills to the bone. Toktamish's army retreats, luring Timur deep into the void. This is Scythian tactics, scorched earth. Wells are poisoned, pastures burned. Timur's army begins to starve. Eyewitnesses write that the price for a piece of bread in the camp skyrocketed, and soldiers boiled stew from roots and the leather of old saddles. It seemed the great campaign would choke in this endless steppe without a single shot fired. Here, in this frozen hell, Timur's true genius manifests. He organizes not a battle, but a grandiose hunt. He arranges the army into a huge chain stretching for tens of miles and begins to drive wild beasts as if they were enemy soldiers. The discipline is ironclad. Letting an antelope escape is a crime equal to treason. This roundup feeds the army and keeps it in shape. They survive where any other army would have turned into a pile of frozen bones. April 1395, the Terek River. Two avalanches meet face to face. Toktamish gathered everyone under his banners, from Russian squads to Circassians and Bulgars. His army is fresh. It is on its own land. Timur has exhausted angry wolves. The Battle of the Terek is a meat grinder that lasted 3 days. At some point, Timur's left flank wavered. The emir himself was surrounded. Legends say he broke a spear on an enemy and fought back with a sword until his guard cut a corridor to him. It was the turning point. Timur throws his last reserves into the fight, and the Golden Horde's army breaks. What started as a battle ends as a massacre. The waters of the Terek, according to chroniclers, turned red and unfit for drinking for 3 days. Toktamish flees into the forests of Bulgar, having lost everything: his crown, honor, army. He will become an outcast again and die somewhere in the Siberian backwoods, betrayed by everyone. But for Timur, victory over the enemy is just the beginning. He needs not just to defeat the Khan, he needs to kill the horde itself. Timur goes north, to the Volga. His goal is Sarai Berka, the Pearl of the Steppe, one of the largest cities in the world at that time. It is the capital of the Golden Horde, a crossroads of trade routes, a city of mosques, baths, and palaces. Timur is not going to plunder it. He is going to erase it. The order is simple: leave no stone unturned. This is not a metaphor. Timur's army methodically, block by block, destroys the city. They tear down walls, burn houses, fill in canals. The inhabitants are driven into slavery or killed. A great city that flourished for a century disappears from the face of the earth in a few weeks. 20th century archaeologists excavating these places will find only a layer of ash and broken bones. Timur diverts the flow of rivers so that water hides the very place where his enemy's capital stood. Why such cruelty? It is geopolitics through genocide. Timur was a pragmatist to the bone. By destroying Sarayberka, Astrakhan, Tana, modern Azov, he destroyed the northern branch of the Great Silk Road. Caravans could no longer go through the steppe. It had become too dangerous and empty. Where did they have to turn? Correct, to the south, through Persia, through Timur's domains, through his customs houses. He literally redrew the economic map of Eurasia with a sword. He forced the world's money to flow into Samarkand simply by destroying the alternative. The Golden Horde received a blow from which it never recovered. It broke into pieces, opening the way for the rise of Moscow. Yes, the irony of history. It was the ferocious Timur, without intending to, who cleared the space for the birth of the Russian Tsardom by destroying its main oppressor. That year he passed with fire through the lands of present-day Ukraine, reached Yelets, stood on the border of the Russian principalities, and turned back. Why didn't he take Moscow? Historians argue to this day. The miracle of the icon of the Mother of God of Vladimir? Or cold calculation, suggesting that in the poor forest lands there was nothing to loot? Most likely, he simply completed the task. The north was broken. The steppe became a graveyard. The army returns home, burdened with endless wagon trains of loot. Ahead ride thousands of carts with gold, furs, and slaves. Behind remains a smoking desert the size of a continent. Timur proved to the world, you cannot hide from him behind walls or distances. He is a force of nature. But the nature of power is such that there is no vacuum. While Timur was breaking the back of the Golden Horde in the north, in the south, in seemingly conquered Persia, someone decided that the old lion would not return. Local princelings raised their heads. Timur's tax collectors began to be found in ditches, with their throats slit. The city of Isfahan, the pearl of Iranian culture, locked its gates and refused to pay tribute, killing the conqueror's garrison. They thought this was an act of freedom. They did not know they had signed a death warrant for themselves that would go down in history as the most terrible lesson in bureaucratic cruelty. The lion returned, and he was hungry. Timur's gaze turned south, and in his eyes there was no longer the thrill of the hunter. There was only the cold glint of an executioner taking his tools out of the box. 1387. Isfahan, the pearl of Persia, the city of roses, poets, and exquisite architecture. Here, the air smells of saffron and expensive perfumes, not horse sweat. The residents of Isfahan are sophisticated people, proud, confident that the beauty of their city can soften the heart of any barbarian. They made a fatal mistake. They believed that one could negotiate with Timur as with an ordinary ruler. When the army of the Iron Cripple approached the walls, the city opened its gates. It seemed the storm had passed. A ransom was set, a garrison entered the city, and the usual, boring looting began within the framework of a war tax. But at night, something happened that turned history into a horror movie. In the dark alleys, a riot flared up. Popular anger is a terrible and senseless thing. The residents, armed with knives and stones, attacked Timur's soldiers. 3,000 Tatar warriors and tax collectors were slaughtered in one night. In the morning, Isfahan woke up in the euphoria of freedom. They thought they had won. They celebrated, not realizing that they had just pulled the pin on a grenade they had shoved into their own pocket. Timur stood under the walls. The massacre was reported to him. Do you expect a burst of rage, screams, an order to storm immediately? No. That would be too simple, too human. Timur acted like a cold, calculating bureaucrat solving an administrative problem. He did not punish the city himself. He forced his army to become accomplices in a crime of such magnitude that blood bound them tighter than any oath. An order was issued, a calm, businesslike order that was read before the formation of every Tumen. It was not an order to kill everyone. It was a quota. Every soldier, from a simple archer to a commander, was required to bring and submit to the chancellery a certain number of severed heads of Isfahan's inhabitants. Think about this nightmare. This is not a battle. This is work. Timur turned genocide into a planned economy. At first, the soldiers hesitated. Many already had acquaintances in the city, some had started affairs, some simply did not want to kill unarmed women and old men for the emir's whim. But an order is an order. If you do not bring the head of an enemy, you will lose your own. And the machine started working. Reluctantly at first, with creaking, the first heads flew from shoulders. And then happened what best describes human nature under conditions of absolute evil. A market arose in Timur's camp. A market of heads. Those soldiers who were richer or more squeamish did not want to dirty their hands themselves. They were willing to pay. Those who were poorer and greedier realized, this is a gold mine. Why kill one if you can kill 10 and sell the extra heads to fellow soldiers? Chroniclers have preserved the prices of that bloody stock exchange for us. At the beginning of the day, when there was still plenty of merchandise, and the soldiers were just getting a taste for it, an Isfahan head could be bought for 1 dinar. That was the price of a human life, 1 gold coin. But by evening, when quotas began to burn and there were fewer living people in the city, panic set in. A deficit. The price skyrocketed. Soldiers ran around the camp offering 20 dinars for a skull, just to report to the commander. Imagine this surrealism. Evening, smoke from fires, and soldiers bargaining with each other like at a vegetable market. I have 2 women's and 1 old man's. I'll sell wholesale for 50. This is the bureaucracy of hell. Timur achieved his goal. He did not just destroy the population of the city, he broke the moral backbone of his army, binding everyone with a bloody, mutual guarantee. After Isfahan, the word pity no longer existed for these people. They went through an initiation after which there was no way back to a normal human life. The result of this administrative work towered over the city the next morning. 70,000 heads. 70,000. They were not dumped into a pit. From them, as in Baghdad, towers were built. 28 huge pyramids held together with clay and lime. The architects of death worked all night, laying out patterns with faces. It was a report on the work done, presented to the client. Timur rode into the dead city. The hooves of his horse clattered on the empty streets. Silence. No one else would come out of an alley with a knife. No one else would dare to hide a coin of taxes. The lesson of submission was learned not only by Persia, but by the whole world. Rumors of the towers of Isfahan flew faster than the wind. Cities surrendered as soon as they saw the dust from the hooves of Timur's cavalry on the horizon. Fear became the main weapon, more effective than siege engines. But look at Timur himself at this moment. Is he satisfied? Did this bloody ritual satisfy his hunger? Number. In his eyes is boredom. Persia is conquered. The Golden Horde is defeated. The West and North lie in ruins or tremble with fear. For a predator of this scale, the world becomes too tight. He needs a new challenge. He needs prey that will make his blood boil with excitement again. His gaze turns to the east. To where, behind the snowy peaks of the Hindu Kush, lies a land of fabulous riches, a land of 1,000 gods and war elephants. India, a land that even Alexander the Great could not conquer. Timur's advisors fall to their knees in horror. "Oh, great Emir," they whisper, "there are jungles there, diseases, heat that melts iron. Our army is children of the steppes. They will die there without a single arrow." Timur just grins into his mustache. They tell him impossible? Perfect. That means it is worth doing. He declares a jihad, a holy war against the infidels, though everyone understands this is a war for gold. This is the most grandiose looting raid in human history. The army, heavy with Persian trophies, begins to turn around. Ahead awaits a trial compared to which the steppe campaigns will seem like a walk in the park. Ahead lie the ice walls of the Hindu Kush and the fiery hell of Delhi. The wheel of history makes a new turn, and under its spokes crunch not Persian skulls, but the stones of the greatest mountains in the world. Timur challenges nature itself. Can a lame old man lead 100,000-strong army across mountains where birds freeze in mid-flight? Can he descend from the heavens into the Indus Valley to unleash an apocalypse there that India will not forget even 600 years later? The answer lies there, in the snowy mist, where the vanguards of his invincible Tumans are already disappearing. Year 1398. If you think you saw the limits of human endurance in the steppes of Russia, you are mistaken. Look up. Before Timur's army rises a wall propping up the sky. The Hindu Kush, killer of Hindus. Mountains where even eagles suffocate from the thin air. Any normal commander would turn the army around. Hannibal, crossing the Alps in comparison to this campaign, took a light stroll through the hills. Timur orders to go up. This is no longer war. This is mountaineering on an industrial scale. Imagine tens of thousands of riders scrambling along icy ledges over the abyss. Horses fall into the void. People freeze alive in their sleep. But Timur does not stop. Historians describe scenes that are impossible to believe. How warriors weave ropes and lower horses from sheer cliffs on ropes, like baskets of provisions. The lame one himself, unable to walk due to his injuries, orders himself to be carried on a litter. He conquers this frozen hell on sheer willpower, dragging a huge army behind him like a locomotive. They descend into the Indus Valley not as men, but as demons fallen from a snowstorm, hungry, angry, having lost the fear of death. India meets them with heat, humidity, and wealth that makes the head spin. But before taking the main prize, Delhi, Timur faces a logistical problem, the solution to which will make you shudder. During the campaign, his army captured a huge number of prisoners, 100,000 people. These are not soldiers. This is living baggage. Artisans, peasants, women dragged along in the hope of selling or using as slaves. But before the decisive battle for Delhi, a rumor passed through Timur's camp. The prisoners, hearing of the approach of the Indian army, began to smile. They hoped. They whispered. For Timur, this was an alarm signal. What if, during the battle, these 100,000 strike in the back? Leave guards? Impossible. Every sword counts. Let them go? Foolish. They will replenish the enemy army. The decision was made instantly. A cold, pragmatic decision that chills the blood even 6 centuries later. Timur ordered the execution of everyone. 100,000 people. Think about that number. 100,000. That is the population of a large medieval city. They were killed not in battle. They were killed in an hour, methodically, like cattle at a slaughterhouse. The order applied to everyone. Every warrior was required to kill his slaves with his own hands. If you had 10 prisoners, you killed 10. Refusal was punishable by the death of the soldier himself. Even peaceful scribes and mullahs accompanying the army were forced to take knives in their hands to prove their loyalty. The earth around the camp soaked up so much crimson that it turned into a swamp. It was the largest preventive cleanup in history. Timur destroyed 100,000 souls, simply just in case. Having lightened the wagons and their consciences, the army approached Delhi. Here, a surprise awaited them, for which the steppe dwellers were not ready. Sultan Mahmud brought out his superweapon against them: war elephants. 120 giants clad in armor, with poisoned tips on their tusks. On their backs sat archers ready to shower the enemy with fire. For Timur's horses, who had never seen such monsters, the mere smell of elephants was cause for panic. Veterans who had marched from the Volga to the Euphrates wavered. It seemed the tactics of light cavalry were powerless here. How to stop a living tank weighing 5 tons? And again, Timur's genius wakes up at a critical moment. He does not panic. He invents a diabolical innovation. He orders all the camels to be gathered, loaded with dry straw, soaked in oil, and the animals tied in chains. The battle begins. The earth shakes from the tread of elephants. The Indian army is confident of victory. And then Timur gives the signal. The straw on the camels' backs is set on fire. Maddened by pain and fear, the animals, turned into living torches, rush with a wild roar straight at the line of elephants. It was chaos impossible to describe. The elephants, seeing a fiery avalanche rushing at them, fell into madness. They turned around and began to trample their own troops. Towers with archers fell from their backs like toy houses. Armored giants turned the Sultan's infantry into ground meat. Timur's army simply entered this breach, finishing off the survivors. It was not a fight. It was a beating of infants. The road to Delhi was open. What followed can hardly be called looting. It was an apocalypse. The great city, accumulating treasures for centuries, was given over to be torn apart. 3 days of slaughter. 3 days when the streets were piled with bodies so high that it was impossible to walk without stepping on a corpse. Timur, as always, claimed he did not want this, that the soldiers got out of control. But strangely enough, the most valuable artisans, masons, and jewelers were carefully sorted and sent under convoy to Samarkand before the general bacchanalia began. The chaos was managed. Delhi died. Chroniclers write, "For 2 months, not a single bird moved a wing over the city. Nothing living remained there. Only ruins, ash, and the stench of corpses." Timur carried away so much gold and precious stones that they had to be hauled by thousands of carts. The legendary riches of India, dreamed of by generations of conquerors, now flowed like a river into the capital of the Iron Tiger. He destroyed a civilization to decorate his garden. He left India, leaving behind a graveyard the size of a country. He was 63 years old. Anyone else in his place would have retired, enjoying unprecedented luxury. But Timur did not know how to stop. While his elephants, laden with Indian gold, walked north, messengers were already bringing him news from the west. There, on the shores of the Bosphorus, a new power was rising: the Ottoman Empire. Sultan Bayezid the Thunderbolt, conqueror of the Balkans, terror of Europe, a man who considered himself equal to Timur. 2 predators of such scale could not share one planet. The air was electrified again. It was not just a war for territory ahead. A duel of egos lay ahead, a battle that was to decide the fate of not only the East, but also the West. Timur, without even washing the dust of Indian roads from his boots, was already drawing maps of a new campaign in his mind. The most grandiose of his life. 2 lions cannot live in one cave, even if that cave is planet Earth. By the beginning of the 15th century, the world froze in anticipation of the inevitable. In the west, like a storm cloud, hung the Ottoman Empire led by Bayezid I. He was called Yildirim, the Thunderbolt. This was not just a sultan. This was a military machine that had crushed Christian knighthood at Nicopolis and now held Constantinople in a death grip. Bayezid considered himself the sword of Islam, invincible and singular. But in the east, Timur's sun had already risen, and the shadows of his pyramids of skulls reached the borders of Turkey. The conflict began not with a battle, but with ink. The correspondence between Timur and Bayezid is a unique monument of medieval trash talk, a diplomacy of insults where every word was sharper than a dagger. Timur wrote coldly, arrogantly, calling himself the scourge of the Almighty, and Bayezid just a petty border prince. "You are nothing more than an ant who thought to fight an elephant," his messages read. Bayezid, whose pride was the size of his empire, exploded with rage. In a reply letter, he made a fatal mistake. He insulted Timur's harem. He wrote, "If you do not come to fight me, may your wives be thrice divorced from you." In the Islamic world of that time, this was worse than a declaration of war. It was a personal, indelible insult to male honor. From that moment, diplomacy died. Only revenge remained. July 20, 1402. The plain near Ankara. Here the fate of the world was decided. Look at the map. Bayezid waited for Timur in the mountains, occupying convenient positions, blocking the passes. He thought the lame one would go head-on, as European knights did. But Timur was not a knight. He was a chess player. Instead of a frontal attack, he performed an insane flanking maneuver. While the Ottomans sat in ambush, Timur's army marched hundreds of miles across the waterless steppe, bypassed the enemy from the rear, and came straight to Ankara, besieging the city where Bayezid's supplies were stored. The Sultan was furious. He had to tear his army from their positions and drive them back, in the heat, in the dust, to save his capital. It was a death march. When the exhausted, dehydrated Turks reached the plain of Ankara, a surprise worthy of an evil genius awaited them. Timur did not just occupy the best positions, he stole their water. The only water source, the Kubuk Creek, was blocked by Timur's engineers. The channel was diverted by building a dam upstream. Imagine the state of an Ottoman soldier. You marched for a week under the scorching sun of Anatolia. You see a cool river in front of you, but it is behind enemy lines. And in your waterskins, dry. Timur forced them to fight not against an army, but against physiology. Thirst killed morale faster than arrows. The battle began in the morning. On one side, 140,000 Ottomans. On the other, 160,000 of Timur's warriors. It was a collision of the two best military machines of the era. But Timur had an ace up his sleeve that Bayezid did not guess: intelligence and espionage. Months before the battle, Timur's agents infiltrated the enemy camp. They found weak links. Tatars from Anatolian tribes, whom Bayezid forcibly drove into his army, hated the Sultan. Timur promised them freedom and gold. In the midst of the battle, when the scales were tipping, a betrayal of epic proportions occurred. 18,000 horsemen of the Ottoman left flank, the Black Tatars, suddenly turned their horses. They did not run away. They struck their own. Imagine the horror in Bayezid's eyes when a quarter of his army starts hacking his own infantry. The front collapsed. The only ones who remained loyal to the Sultan to the end were, paradoxically, Serbian knights commanded by Stefan Lazarevic. Christians fought for the Muslim Sultan more furiously than his co-religionists, cutting corridors in the enemy ranks, begging Bayezid to retreat. But the pride of the Thunderbolt was stronger than armor. He refused to run. "I do not retreat!" he screamed as the ring around his guard tightened. By evening, it was all over. The Sultan, before whom Europe trembled, lay in the dust, bound at the feet of the Lame Conqueror. This battle changed everything. The Ottoman Empire, ready to swallow Europe, crumbled into pieces in one day. Byzantium, which was doomed to fall any day, received a reprieve for half a century. Timur, without wishing to, became the savior of the Christian world. In Paris and London, bells rang, praising the distant savior Tamerlane. They did not realize they were praying for a monster who simply decided to dine on a different dish. And then begins the legend that chills the soul. They say Timur put Bayezid in an iron cage. He carted him around the cities of Asia like a rare beast, like a living trophy. Some chronicles claim that during feasts, Timur used the back of the defeated sultan as a footstool to climb onto the throne. Bayezid's wife, the Serbian princess Olivera, was forced to serve guests at feasts naked before her husband's eyes. Whether this is true or propaganda by Timur's enemies is debated to this day. Most likely, the cage was a barred palanquin in which the noble prisoner was transported, but the essence does not change. The humiliation was total. Timur broke Bayezid not with torture of the body, but with torture of the spirit. The great sultan saw his empire torn apart, his sons starting a dogfight for the throne, skillfully fueled by Timur handing out labels for rule to everyone and anyone. Bayezid the Thunderbolt faded away. He died in captivity just 8 months after the battle, in March 1403. Some say from poison he took himself, hidden in a ring. Some say from a broken heart, unable to bear the shame. Timur looked at the body of his greatest enemy without gloating. For him, it was just a finished game. The king is defeated, the pieces put back in the box. Anatolia lay in ruins. Smyrna was taken by storm from the Knights Hospitaller in 2 weeks, although the Ottomans could not take it for 20 years, and the heads of knights launched from catapults became the final salute of this campaign. It would seem, is that it now? The West is defeated, the North destroyed, the South conquered. He is almost 70 years old. His bones ache from old wounds. His eyes are weakening. It is time to settle down, sit in the gardens of Samarkand, listen to the singing of birds, and wait for the meeting with eternity. But Timur is built differently. Peace for him is poison. Victory over Bayezid brought no satisfaction. It only freed up space for a new, even more insane goal. His gaze turns to where the sun rises, to the only empire that can compare with his own in greatness. To China, to the Ming dynasty. It was a dream that bordered on suicide. To march thousands of miles through deserts and mountains to fight a civilization possessing a 1 million-strong army. But Timur announces a new campaign. He says he must atone for his sins by destroying the pagans of China, though in reality, he is driven by the same insatiable hunger as 40 years ago in the gorges of Kesh. The army, not yet cooled from the Battle of Ankara, receives an order to prepare winter clothes. Samarkand freezes in horror. The winter of 1404 promises to be fierce, but the iron cripple has already mounted his horse. The last act of the bloody drama begins, and this time Timur will face an enemy that cannot be defeated by cunning or cruelty. Time itself. Winter, 1404. The steppe has turned into an icy desert where the wind tears the skin off your face. Look at this army. 200,000 people wrapped in furs trudge through a snowstorm that has no end. They are going east. Their goal is China. This is not just a military campaign. It is an act of madness, a rebellion against logic itself. At the head of this freezing avalanche is a man who has to be carried on a litter. He is almost 70. Timur can no longer stay in the saddle. His body is a ruin. Eyes blinded by cataracts barely distinguish the road. Hands shake. Old wounds ache in the weather so much that he grinds his teeth. But this old man is more dangerous than any young Khan. His will drags the army forward, through snowdrifts in which horses drown. Why? Why does he need China when he already has half the world? The answer is simple and terrible. He cannot stop. Stopping for him is death. He must move, must kill, must conquer, to drown out the voice of time whispering in his ear that the end is near. He declared this campaign atonement, a holy war for the faith. But terror is read in the eyes of his generals. They understand, we are going to die. We are going to fight not the Ming dynasty, but winter, which cannot be defeated by a sword. Otrar, February 1405. A city on the edge of the steppe, which became the final halt of the great conqueror. The cold here is such that birds fall dead right in flight. Timur stops here to wait out the most severe frosts, but the cold penetrates not only under the walls of the tents, it penetrates into his blood. The Lord of the World falls ill. At first, it seems like a common cold, but the fever flares up instantly. Doctors, trembling with fear, apply ice to his chest, trying to bring down the heat, but it is like trying to extinguish a volcano with a glass of water. For the first time in his life, Timur faces an enemy that cannot be bribed, cannot be intimidated, and cannot be beheaded. Death sits at his bedside, and it takes no bribes. The scene in the emir's bedroom resembles a theater of the absurd. Around the dying old man gathered people who just yesterday commanded armies capable of wiping civilizations off the face of the earth. Now, they are helpless. They listen to his raspy breathing and think with horror about one thing. What will happen to us tomorrow? Timur, even in delirium, continues to give orders for the offensive. He demands reports on food supplies, on the state of crossings. He refuses to believe that his body, this faithful instrument of war, has broken completely. On February 18th, 1405, the heart that made millions of hearts beat in unison from Delhi to Damascus stopped. Timur died. And that is where the real chaos begins. What to do? If the army finds out that the leader is gone, a riot will begin. Tribes will tear each other's throats out. The Chinese campaign will turn into a civil war right here in snowy Otrar. The generals make a decision worthy of Timur himself. They decide to lie. The death is classified. The emir's body is embalmed hastily, doused with musk and camphor to hide the smell of decomposition. He is put in a closed litter, as if he is just sick and does not want to see anyone. Picture this cortege, a dead man at the head of the army. Generals approach the litter, pretend to receive orders, nod to the void, and go out to the troops shouting, "The great emir has commanded to march!" It is a performance on the edge of a precipice, but it is impossible to play it for long. The smell of camphor is too sharp, and the whispers of servants spread faster than the plague. The truth breaks out, and in that same second, the great empire begins to burst at the seams. The Chinese campaign is cancelled instantly. No one wants to go die in the snows without Timur. The army turns around. Timur's grandsons and sons, who just yesterday swore eternal love, rush to divide the inheritance. Everyone pulls a piece of the blanket onto themselves, tearing the empire into shreds. Samarkand, Herat, Tabriz. Yesterday they were pearls of one crown. Today they are centers of warring states. Timur's body is taken back to Samarkand, not as a triumphator, but as dangerous cargo. The passes are blocked with snow. The road home turns into a gloomy procession. The one who dreamed of world domination now takes up exactly as much space as any beggar. 6 feet of a wooden box. He is buried in the Gur-e-Amir mausoleum, tomb of the Emir. This masterpiece of architecture with an azure dome he built for his beloved grandson, but fate decreed otherwise. He lay there himself, at the feet of his spiritual mentor, Mir Said Baraka. Even after death, he wanted to show humility, though in life he bowed his head to no one. On his tombstone, an inscription was carved that still gives goosebumps. "When I rise from the dead, the world will tremble." This is not just an epitaph, it is a threat, a warning. Timur knew he was a demon of war and locked himself under a heavy slab of black-green jade, like a genie in a bottle. The empire built on fear collapsed almost immediately, but the fear remained. It soaked into the stones of Samarkand, into the legends of the steppe, into the genetic memory of peoples. People believed that Timur's spirit guards his domains even from the grave, that his peace cannot be disturbed, that he who dares to open the coffin will release not just dust, but the very essence of war. For centuries, no one dared to touch the jade. Wars passed by, empires were born and died, and Timur slept. Until the 20th century came, a century that rejected mysticism and believed in science. A century that decided ancient curses were just fairy tales for children. Soviet scientists received a task: open the tomb. They needed to reconstruct Timur's appearance, to prove that he was a historical figure, not a myth. They did not know they were signing a death warrant for millions. They went into the crypt with instruments and searchlights, not hearing the whispers of old men at the Samarkand bazaar. And the whispers were getting louder. June 1941 was approaching. The door to the underworld was being prepared to be opened with the key of science. June 1941, Samarkand. The heat is such that the asphalt melts, but in the Gur-e-Amir mausoleum, it is cool. Here, into the abode of the dead, bursts the 20th century. It smells not of incense, but of gasoline from generators, flashes of cameras, and the arrogance of Soviet science. An expedition led by the famous anthropologist Mikhail Gerasimov arrived with a clear goal: open the tomb, retrieve the bones, and restore Timur's true appearance. For these people, there is no mysticism. They are materialists. They are children of the revolution who tore down churches and turned mosques into warehouses. For them, Timur is not the scourge of God, but a historical object, a set of bones that needs to be measured, described, and put on a museum shelf. They laugh at local superstitions. It seems to them that an electric lamp suspended under the ancient dome will disperse any shadows of the past. But Samarkand is a city where time flows differently. While the scientists install winches and jacks, 3 old men approach the expedition's cameraman, Malik Kayumov. Their faces are cut with wrinkles like old parchment. They sit in a tea house next to the mausoleum and watch the fuss of strangers with horror. One of them beckons Kayumov and opens an old book crumbling in his hands. He pokes a knobby finger at lines in Arabic. "Look, son," he says in a trembling voice. "It is written here. Who opens Timur's grave will release the spirit of war, and there will be a slaughter such as the world has never seen." Kayumov, young and impressionable, runs to Gerasimov. He tells him about the elders, about the book, about the prophecy. Gerasimov is a man of science, a skeptic to the bone. He listens, smiles, and pats the guy on the shoulder. "It's folklore, Malik, grandmother's tales. We are here to make history, not to be afraid of ghosts." The elders are chased away. The work continues. June 19th. They open the tombs of Timur's sons. June 20th. The turn reaches the main slab. Dark green jade. Heavy, oily stone that seems to have absorbed the night itself. Winches creak, stretching like nerves. The stone yields reluctantly. At this moment, as recorded in the diaries of participants, something strange happens in the mausoleum. The winch breaks. The lights go out. A heavy, suffocating smell hangs in the air. It is not the smell of sulfur. It is a mixture of camphor, rose oil, and incense, aromas used to embalm the body 500 years ago. The smell is so thick that heads spin. It seems the air itself resists the intrusion. But Soviet engineers fix the wiring, change the winches, and continue working. Persistence worthy of Timur himself. June 21st, night. The slab is moved. Beneath it is a wooden coffin, blackened by time. The lid is lifted. Gerasimov leans over the remains. In the spotlight lies a skeleton. The silence is such that you can hear a fly buzzing against the lamp glass. The anthropologist takes the skull in his hands. He turns it. Even without flesh, the greatness is visible. But the main proof is the bones of the limbs. The right leg is indeed crippled, the kneecap fused to the thigh. The right arm is dry and deformed. There is no doubt. Before them is Timur, the iron cripple. The one who built pyramids of heads now lies on a table, disassembled into anatomical fragments. The scientists rejoice. It is a triumph of science. They drink wine, congratulate each other. They pack the bones into boxes to take them to Moscow. They go to sleep toward morning, confident they have made a great discovery. They wake up a few hours later to a voice from a loudspeaker. Molotov's voice. June 22nd, 1941. Germany attacked the Soviet Union. The Great Patriotic War began. Coincidence? Skeptics will say, absolutely. Operation Barbarossa was developed for months. Hitler did not time the attack to the schedule of excavations in Uzbekistan. Troops had been standing on the border for a long time. It is just an accident. But imagine what those standing in the crypt felt. Those who chased away the old men with the book. Kayumov later recalled that he was seized by icy horror. We released him. We opened the door. War rolls east, sweeping away everything in its path, just as Timur's Tumans once rolled. Millions dead. Prisoners, burned cities. It seemed the spirit of war really broke out of the bottle and is now feasting on the expanses from Brest to the Volga. The expedition is urgently wrapped up. Timur's bones are taken not to a museum, but into evacuation, to the rear. But the legend of the curse has already gone walking along the fronts. Soldiers in trenches whisper the story of how scientists woke the god of war. Rumors reach the very top. They say Marshal Zhukov reported the prophecy to Stalin. Stalin was a Marxist, but he was also a former seminarian and a man who understood the power of symbols perfectly. When the enemy approached the Volga, when the fate of the country hung by a thread at Stalingrad, a decision was made that does not fit into any logic of materialism. November 1942. A plane with Timur's remains rises into the sky. According to one version, It circles over the front line, as if showing Tamerlane the new great battle. According to another, it is simply urgently returned to Samarkand with the order, "Put everything back as it was." The bones are brought to Gur-e-Amir with honors, not as a museum exhibit, but as the remains of a great ruler. They are placed back in the coffin. The lid is closed. The heavy jade slab is returned to its place. Timur finds peace again. November 19th, 1942. A few days after the tomb was closed, Soviet troops launch a counteroffensive at Stalingrad. Operation Uranus begins. The backbone of the Wehrmacht is broken. The war turns back. Of course, historians will tell you about the accumulation of reserves, about the genius of Rokossovsky and Zhukov, about the heroism of soldiers. And they will be right. But in the twilight of a tea house in Samarkand, old men still nod their heads and say otherwise. They say the war was stopped not by tanks. The war was stopped because the demon was driven back into the grave. This story remains one of the darkest mysteries of the 20th century. We will never know if it was mysticism or a chain of random events. But the fact remains, the greatest war in human history began on the day of the opening of the grave of the greatest conqueror and turned in the moment of his return to the earth. Even after death, Timur continued to play his favorite chess. Only now the pieces were not horsemen with sabers, but tank armies and entire nations. He proved his last theorem: you cannot joke with the past. But Timur's paradox is not only in destruction. This man, whose name became synonymous with death, left behind not only mountains of skulls. If you walk out of the dark crypt of Gur-e-Amir and look at the sky of Samarkand, you will see stars. The very stars his grandson studied. For on the blood spilled by the grandfather, the strangest and most beautiful flower of the East grew, the Timurid Renaissance. The story of a killer flows into the story of a scientist, and this contrast cuts the eyes sharper than the glint of a dagger. Step out of the stuffy crypt of Gur-e-Amir. Inhale the night air of Samarkand. Raise your head. Above you is the same sky that a man looked at 6 centuries ago, trying to atone for the sins of his dynasty not with prayers, but with mathematics. We are entering the strangest, most tragic and beautiful chapter of this bloody saga. It is a paradox that historians cannot explain. How, on soil soaked with millions of gallons of blood, did a tender, fragile flower of enlightenment suddenly grow? It is called the Timurid Renaissance. Sounds like a cruel joke. The grandfather took heads, and the grandson took down old dogmas. Meet Ulugbek, Timur's grandson, a man who was supposed to become the new Scourge of God, but chose to become the Lord of the Stars. Imagine Samarkand in the first half of the 15th century. It is the New York or Paris of its time. Thanks to the gold looted by Timur, the city is drowning in luxury. But Ulugbek spends the treasury not on new campaigns. He does not want to burn Moscow or Delhi. He builds madrasas. He invites the best scientists of the Islamic world, astronomers, mathematicians, philosophers. Al-Kashi, Kazizadeh al-Rumi. These names thundered then, louder than the names of generals. While Europe still slept in the twilight of the Middle Ages, here, in the heart of Asia, people calculated the length of the sidereal year to the second. Look at Kuhak Hill on the outskirts of the city. There stands a building that local fanatics call Shatan's Tower. This is Ulugbek's observatory, a grandiose 3-story cylinder, inside of which is hidden a giant sextant with a radius of 40 meters. Imagine an instrument the size of a 10-story building pointed at the sky. Ulugbek spends nights on end there. He does not sleep. He looks into the abyss. He compiles the Zij-e Sultani, a catalogue of the starry sky. 1,018 stars. He determined the tilt of the Earth's axis with such precision that modern computers correct his data by only mere fractions of a degree. It was a triumph of reason. Ulugh Bek proved that the Earth is not a center of humiliation, but part of a great cosmic mechanism. But here is the tragedy. Ulugh Bek was a genius scientist, but a terrible politician. In a world of wolves, you cannot be an astronomer. Timur left behind a system that worked only on fear and expansion. When the ruler stops chopping off heads and starts looking at the moon, the wolves begin to bare their teeth. The clergy whispered, "He sold his soul to the stars. He lets Christians and idolaters into the holy city. He has forgotten his grandfather's covenants." Generals grumbled, "Our swords are rusting. Where is the war? Where is the loot?" Ulugh Bek was a stranger in his own kingdom. He was too smart for a throne built of skulls. And the blow, as is customary in the Timurid dynasty, came from the closest blood, his son, Abd al-Latif. Remember that name. It is the name of a non-entity who decided that power was more important than a father. Abd al-Latif was the complete opposite of Ulugh Bek. Greedy, cruel, dim-witted, but very pious. The ideal puppet for dervishes dreaming of bringing back the good old days of terror. The son went to war against the father. Autumn 1449, battle near Samarkand. Scientist against fanatic. Ulugh Bek lost. Not because he was a coward, but because his army did not believe in stars. It believed in strength. Ulugh Bek surrendered to the winner's mercy. He asked for only one thing: to let him go to Mecca, perform the Hajj, and live out his days in prayer and science. The son, looking into his father's eyes, nodded. "Go in peace," he said. But it was a lie. Abd al-Latif could not leave the legitimate ruler alive. This is a lesson he learned not from his astronomer father, but from his tyrant great-grandfather. Timur killed enemies. Abd al-Latif decided to kill the conscience of the nation. October 27th, 1449. Ulugh Bek rides out of Samarkand. He rides slowly, looking back at the domes of his observatory. He does not yet know this is his last look. In a small village, a messenger catches up with him with an order to stop, and then a certain Peres Abbas enters the tent, a man whom Ulugh Bek once helped, whom he elevated. No duels, no last words, just burly hands holding the old man, and a traitor decapitating the greatest mind of the era with one stroke of a sword. Feel this moment. The head that held the secrets of the universe falls onto a dirty carpet. The candle goes out. In that same second, the Timurid Renaissance ends. The patricidal son did not just kill a parent, he killed the future. What happened next? Barbarians burst into the observatory. Unique instruments were smashed with sledgehammers. The library was looted. The greatest scientific center of the world was turned into ruins, covered with earth to erase the very memory that people once thought here, and not just prayed. Ulugh Bek's books were saved by a miracle. A loyal student, Ali Kushji, risking his life, smuggled manuscripts to Constantinople, and only thanks to this did Europe learn about the works of the Samarkand genius. Abd al-Latif? Oh, fate has a wicked sense of humor. He sat on the throne soaked in his father's blood for exactly 6 months. 6 months. And then he was killed by his own soldiers. The head of the patricide was hung on the portal of the very madrasa his father built. On it was written, "Patricide." But it was too late. The light went out. Samarkand, which could have become the center of world science, plunged back into the abyss of civil strife and obscurantism. History made its choice. It showed that an empire built on violence cannot give birth to anything living. Timur's blood proved stronger than Ulugbek's reason. The genetics of war defeated the genetics of creation. The ruins of the observatory stood forgotten for 500 years. Locals grazed goats there, not even suspecting that under a layer of clay lay the remains of a time machine, capable of looking into eternity. This is the bitterest lesson of Timur's history. Great conquests disappear. Gold is stolen, cities are rebuilt, but lost time cannot be returned. Imagine where human civilization would be if Ulugbek's works had not been interrupted by the stroke of a sword. If the East had continued the path of enlightenment and not turned onto the path of isolation. We stand on the ashes of an unrealized future. The stars over Samarkand are just as bright, but there is no one left to look at them. Timur won. His philosophy of total power crushed the timid sprouts of reason. But this victory is Pyrrhic, because an empire that kills its best sons is doomed not just to death, it is doomed to oblivion. And so we come to the finale. The dust settles. The screams of victims fade into the centuries. Only the wind remains, walking through the ruins. And the main question, what did the man who wanted to own the whole world actually leave behind? The answer will not please you, because in the end, from pyramids of skulls, only calcium remains, fertilizing the steppe wormwood. Timur's empire did not die, it evaporated, like a puddle of blood on a hot stone under the desert sun. Barely had the iron cripple's body cooled in the jade sarcophagus when the monolith he forged for 35 years crumbled into dust. It was not a slow sunset, like Rome's. It was an explosion. An instant, brutal disintegration proving one simple truth. A state held together only by fear of one man is doomed to disappear along with his last breath. Sons and grandsons, the very ones he taught the art of war but not the art of governance, clawed at each other's throats. The map of Asia turned into a broken mirror. Yesterday's vassals declared independence. Yesterday's allies slaughtered Timurid garrisons. The Great Silk Road, which Timur tried so hard to monopolize by destroying competitors in the north, began to die. Caravans started bypassing these lands. Why? Because where Timur's iron order once reigned, such that, according to legend, a lone woman with a tray of gold could walk from India to Turkey without fear, chaos now reigned. Bandits, petty tyrants, endless wars of all against all. Timur wanted to make Samarkand the center of the world, but by destroying all neighbors, he turned it into an island in the middle of an ocean of ruins. And an island without bridges is doomed to extinction. But history loves irony. One shard of this bloody mirror survived and reflected light so brightly that it blinded the world. Babur, Timur's great-great-grandson, poet, warrior, exile. Driven out of his native Fergana Valley by Uzbek Khans, he, like his great ancestor, did not give up. He went south. To where Timur once staged the Delhi massacre. Babur came to India not to plunder, but to live. He founded the Mughal Empire. Think about this paradox. The Taj Mahal, this white marble hymn to love standing in Agra, was built by Timur's descendants. The blood of the cruelest butcher in history flowed in the veins of those who created the most exquisite beauty of the East. But this was already a different empire. The Mughals understood what Timur did not. You can come to power on bayonets, but sitting on them is uncomfortable. And what remained in the homeland of the Scourge of God? What happened to Transoxiana? Go to Shakrisabz today. Find the ruins of the Aksaray Palace. once proudly carved on its portal with the words, "If you doubt our power, look at our buildings." Today, only giant pylons, gnawed by time, remain of these buildings. The wind walks between them, raising dust. This dust is all that remains of the ambitions to own the universe.
Timur built for the ages, but he built for himself, not for the people. His architecture is the architecture of intimidation. It was meant to crush a person, turn him into an ant. And when the pressure disappeared, people just left, leaving the colossi to die in solitude. Timur lost his main battle, the battle against oblivion. Genghis Khan left behind the yasa, a law by which the steppe lived for centuries. Napoleon left the code on which the jurisprudence of Europe stands. Alexander the Great left Hellenism, which mixed cultures. What did Timur leave? Mountains of skulls? They have long turned into calcium and fertilized the wormwood. Plundered cities? They were rebuilt or disappeared under the sands. Fear? Fear is a perishable good. The grandsons of those who trembled at the sound of his name were already composing fairy tales about him, in which he was either a hero or a demon, but no longer a reality. He was a genius of tactics, but a bankrupt of strategy. He was a virtuoso of destruction, who sincerely believed he was building a great future. But the truth is that you cannot build paradise after first turning everything around into hell. Timur was a force of nature, a hurricane, a tsunami. We do not judge a hurricane for destroyed houses. We just hide, wait it out, and then come out and start cleaning up the debris. Humanity spent the 15th century cleaning up the debris left by Timur. Europe breathed freely when the Ottoman noose loosened. Russia began to raise its head, freed from the pressure of the horde, which the Lame One finished off. Persia began to heal its wounds. China, never seeing Timur's banners, continued to live in its eternity. The world digested Timur and spat out his bones. Today, standing at his tomb under the enchanting azure dome, we feel a strange mixture of admiration and disgust. We admire the willpower of a man who, being a cripple, forced the world to rotate around his axis. But we are sickened by the price he paid for it. Timur is an eternal reminder to all who crave absolute power, a reminder that greatness not fertilized by humanism is barren, that you can win all battles, but lose the war with history, that pyramids of skulls are built faster than universities, but they also crumble faster. He wanted to become the god of war, and he became one. But gods belong in myths, not among people. His tragedy is that he was too great for this world, but too cruel for this world to love him. He remained a lone wolf howling at the moon from the top of a mountain of bones. And in this howl, there is no triumph. In it, there is only infinite, icy emptiness. Look at your hands. Imagine that they hold the fates of millions. Could you stop? Or is the thirst for power a disease for which there is no cure but death? Timur could not, and history passed its verdict on him. He became the architect of ruins, the world's greatest builder of emptiness. Now ask yourself one question, looking into the empty eye sockets of history. Is the memory of a great conqueror worth the tear of a single child? Or, as Timur showed us, is greatness measured not by the happiness of subjects, but by the height of a tower made of their heads? The answer to this question each of us must find for ourselves. Otherwise, a new Timur is already saddling a horse somewhere in the steppes of our future.